Hi, everyone. Welcome to the press conference. My name is Carlos Cardona, and I'm the campaign manager for Marianne Williamson 2024 for president. And also with us today is Kara Eastman, the campaign manager for Cenk Uygur, running for president also in 2024. And we, of course, have the candidates with us, Marianne Williamson and Cenk Uygur. And Cenk, the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
All right. Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. So obviously we're convening here to talk about what's happening in the state of Florida. They did several absurd things there at the Democratic Party. Let's talk about it, and then obviously we'll take questions. I'll go first, Marianne will go second, and then we'll take your questions. They gave us no notice, any of the candidates, as to when they would be having a meeting to discuss which candidates could go on the ballot. And I want the press to understand, this is really important. We're in all of the other states. All three of the campaigns are working diligently on getting on the ballots everywhere. So we're aware of the rules of the different states. We're all trying very, very hard to abide by those rules. And I think we're doing a great job. We spend a lot of time and energy in all three of the campaigns trying to make sure that we know when the deadlines are, what the requirements are. There are often signature requirements, financial requirements, forms, etc. And it's basically our number one task because it's one of the bigger challenges in this campaign. And so with all the other states up until now, there's been a relatively fair process. And now we could argue about whether we agree or disagree with the decisions that they've made in regards to who's on the ballot or not. And I would probably have the largest disagreements out of the three of us for sure on getting included or not included in some of the ballots. But this is not about that. And this is definitely not about my naturalized citizen issue. This is about all three of us being excluded in a way that was absurd, ridiculous, counterproductive, done obviously in secret, obviously to help the incumbent Joe Biden, and needs to be reversed. So we have sent in a letter saying that they should include our names in the list that they are giving to the Secretary of State today. We'll, of course, see how that plays out. And we give them every opportunity to do the right thing. And we'd be thrilled if they did the right thing. And we believe in democracy. We believe in letting the Democratic voters decide. And the number one problem with what the Florida Democratic Party is doing is not how it affects me, Marianne, and Dean. It's how it affects the Florida Democratic voters. They are robbing them of their voice. They're saying that democracy is not important, that you should not participate in the process. And we don't care what you think. We don't care if you support the incumbent, don't support the incumbent, whether you want to do a vote for one of the other candidates that you find to be compelling, a candidate that is closer to your point of view, a candidate that you think has a better chance of winning, etc. We are just going to be authoritarian, and we're going to do this in the dark of night. And their excuses, of course, have been comical. And all three of us are perfectly aware of the rules in every other state, and we have asked repeatedly the state of Florida through our campaigns what the rules are here so that we could abide by them. They never returned our calls or our emails to any of the campaigns. And then the day before the deadline, they say, oh, by the way, we made this decision. Not only did we make this decision, we made it a month ago, but we never let any of you guys know. Come on. There's no way in the world to interpret that in any way other than bad intent. But finally, from my point of view, and again, I'm super happy to take questions. Actually, there's two last things I'll say. One is if they don't do the thing that we're asking for, we, of course, then will have to take further actions. And one of the actions that we're definitively going to take is that we're going to do an implementation challenge, both for the Florida Democratic Party and the DNC, and try to get them to actually follow their own rules and bylaws, because we are correct. This Florida Democratic Party is incorrect in how they have applied these rules. And so that implementation challenge has succeeded before. It will likely succeed in this case as well if we have to go to it. And it's just flat out embarrassing for the Florida Democratic leadership that they need to be forced into following their own rules. And then finally, I don't understand the logic of what they've done here. I mean, they've bungled it so thoroughly. According to the Florida laws, if there's only one person on the ballot, there's no person on the ballot, and there is no election at all. Well, in that case, I don't know why anyone is assuming that Joe Biden would get those delegates. By definition, there's no election. No one won. There's no one on the ballot. So I hereby claim all of those delegates. Okay, now Marianne can also claim those delegates. And do you know how we would sort that out? We'd have an election. That's how we would sort it out. Okay. But if you're not going to hold an election, there's no way in the world Joe Biden has those delegates. That's not a thing where you say, oh, we didn't hold an election, but we have just picked the one person in the state of Florida, presumably Nikki Fried, has picked who the candidate is going to be. No, that's not how it works. That's not how it works according to your own rules. That's not how it works according to the DNC. And that's not how it works in a democracy. And the Democratic Party should be the biggest advocate and champion of democracy, especially at a moment like this, when they say that the other side is challenging democracy at its core. And I believe that. That's why I'm in this race, because I think Trump would destroy democracy. But apparently Nikki Fried's going to beat him to the punch. So let's be honest about what's happening in the state of Florida. Authoritarianism, anti-democratic values, and not what the Democratic Party should stand for. Marianne.
Well, I certainly agree with everything that Cenk said. And I think that the Florida statute itself is unconstitutional, giving that kind of power to the party. The party itself is a political committee. It's not a government agency, but it's playing a quasi-governmental function here. And it has no right to block democracy this way. It has a responsibility to the public good. And we all know that we're living at a time when our democracy itself is in crisis. We all know that the threats to democracy of them that are represented by people such as Donald Trump. But the irony here, of course, is that the Democratic Party claims to be trying to protect democracy, but their way of doing it is to suppress democracy. It's wrong, and it's also undercutting of the most basic rights. If we cannot assume that the people of the United States have fair and equal access to knowing even who their candidates are, then we don't have fair and equal access to the vote. And this is why this is a transgression of the 14th Amendment. And this is what we will be claiming in court if we have to. Both Dean, all of us, Dean and Cenk and myself, are going to take all legal action that we can and that we feel is necessary. We're going to communicate to the public, and we appreciate, I know all three of us appreciate that you are here. You know, you can't let these so-called little transgressions pass. We have to hold a line right here. This is not just about the fact that it's 200 and some odd delegates. It's not just the fact that it's drama going on within the Democratic Party. This is the chipping away of our democracy. And as Cenk pointed out, what an irony that the party called the Democratic Party, the party that claims to be the champion of democracy, has basically decided that Joe Biden will be the candidate. Now, this is authoritarianism, just as Cenk said. When I was a child, we were told that in the Soviet Union, people could vote, but they were told who their options were. And that's exactly what's happening here. And you have over 70% of Democratic voters who have made it clear time and time again that they want to hear other options. In this case, other options exist. And at this point, the Democratic Party, the state of Florida itself, have no right to manipulate the circumstances so in such a way that people are denied access to who their candidates are, and to hear from us and to know that we're about. Unfortunately, this is part of a larger concerted effort that the Democratic Party has been taking. This has to do with media suppression. It has to do with invisibilization, erasure. But it stops right here, or at least it will not go unchallenged right here by myself. And I think I hear the same kind of conviction in Cenk's voice. We certainly have heard it from Dean as well. And I'm with him 100%. And all of us will do what we feel we have to do. And I think that we're the ones who are standing up for democracy in this case, not the Democratic Party.
Okay, we're happy to take questions here. And the reason that Carlos and Cara are on, and Cara Eastman's my campaign manager, and she was a Democratic candidate in Nebraska, nearly beat Don Bacon. and I'm awfully proud of that, and maybe one day again. Okay, but they're on because they were the people who corresponded with the Florida Democratic Party more so than we did. And so in case there's any details or questions that you want to ask about that, they might be able to answer them as well.
Hi, Isabella Murray with ABC here. Just wondering what the timeline would be as far as legal action goes, and if you've communicated with the Florida Democrats since you've all been making these statements.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the timeline is not great here. They were supposed to submit names to the Florida Secretary of State yesterday. And we asked them to submit our names in a letter that we sent them yesterday. Now, why did we send it yesterday? That's because they let us know the day before. And it's a very fair and good question that you guys should ask them. Hey, if this was meant with good intent, why did you keep it secret until the day before you're supposed to submit the names? And especially if you say you voted on October 29th, especially given that all three campaigns contacted the Florida Democratic Party repeatedly, probably a combination of dozens of times, and you didn't respond to them at all until the very last day. And then you told them, oh, by the way, we'd made this decision in the dark of night a month ago. So if no names were submitted to the Secretary of State and there is no election in Florida, which is likely the case at this point, I don't know how they would reverse it when it comes to the relationship between the Florida Democratic Party and the Florida Secretary of State. They have bungled this royally. But I do know that we're definitely going to, once that becomes confirmed, that we will do that implementation challenge through the DNC. But under no circumstances is Joe Biden getting those delegates. If there's no election, no one won. The idea that, well, we decided he won in our heads is not a thing.
There is a December 5th deadline for implementation, and we will challenge that with whatever injunction that we can legally file.
Yeah, hi, this is Mitch Perry, the Florida Phoenix. A question for Ms. Williamson or her team. You guys did get on the ballot here in Florida in 2020. Can you talk about what you did then versus what you did or didn't do this time?
Well, in 2020, I was on the debates, on 2 Democratic debates. So it was very difficult to claim that I wasn't a candidate in 2020. And to be honest, it's very difficult to claim that the rest of us aren't candidates this time. However, they are doing it because they're doing it just because they can. And we're here because we want to make clear that they can't.
I had a discussion with Philip Jerez this week, and I brought that exact point up. I was like, my candidate qualified in 2020, and there was no rules, nothing in place that said that the process that they had to go through to get on your ballot. And he said, we had simply decided in the party because she qualified for the debates and she would qualify for the ballot. And I said, well, and then I challenged that. And I said, okay, then, there's no debates right now, so you can't go by that measure. So what measures are you going by? And they said, we just decided at the convention October 29th. And I said, well, you decided based on what decision process making did you have? Like, what was the standard? Marianne is polling at 16% in some polls, 9% in others. Like, so what was your decision making? And he had no answer for that, except they were stuck on the fact that they needed to hear from all of us. And we're like, well, we've been trying. The information that you gave the state secretary for us to contact you is a phone number that you do not check the inbox in. And it's an email that you clearly don't respond because everybody has been trying to email you and we just get an automated reply back. So that's definitely something that, you should all ask definitely Florida State Dems in regards.
Yeah, I'll add one thing here. Look, let's take that average that I've seen in the last half a dozen polls or so. Marianne's at 12%. She would be tied with DeSantis, above Nikki Haley. She would be second among the Republicans, let alone the fact that she's second among Democrats. On which planet is that not a valid candidate? the idea is absurd. Dean Phillips is a United States congressman. On what planet is he not a valid candidate? I run the largest progressive media organization. Now, like, you could make an argument on my naturalized citizen versus natural born citizen issue, and we'll take that to court, etc. But Arkansas has already put me on the ballot, and I'm polling higher than 2 governors. So it's absurd on all 3 counts, but it's almost reality denying. It's so absurd. It's Kafkaesque. Oh, a person polling higher than almost any challenger on the Republican or Democratic side doesn't exist? That's absurd. So yeah, it doesn't get any crazier and more ridiculous than this.
Somebody's asking where's Dean Phillips?
So Dean made his statements yesterday. He had a interview with Politico. That's how he handled it. But the 3 of us are going to be united soon in some of the states going forward. That's what it looks like. And this is not the only time that this is that. Let me put it this way: future states are also considering this kind of absurdity, and we're here to tell you that it's not going to work. That you can't just wish us away. And let's be honest too about why they're doing this. It appears that they think that Joe Biden is incredibly weak, that he could not withstand Marianne Williamson, Dean Phillips, and Cenk Uygur. I think, like, if you're a Joe Biden fan, you should be insulted by what the Florida Democrats did. You think he can't beat us? Okay, that's an interesting assumption. So, Ryan, I saw you ask what other states. So right now we're working on a state where we're trying to ameliorate this before it happens. So I don't want to put them on blast, but we might have another state that pops up in about a day. So either we're going to fix that behind the scenes because we're good people, we're Democrats, we're a family, and we're trying to do everything right. We're team behind the scenes, and we're not trying to create a conflict here. We're just trying to do the bare minimum of getting on a ballot, and we've all earned it, and there's no need for the conflict. But if the conflict arises from the states, then we're not going to just go away. We're not going to go quietly into that good night. Then if they start the conflict, we will pursue the conflict.
You know, none of the 3 of us are bomb throwers. We're not here to destroy the Democratic Party. We're here like so many millions of other people who not only want to save the Democratic Party, but want the Democratic Party to win in 2024. We're not here to create, we're not spoilers. We are running for the Democratic nomination. And by suppressing our voices, the Democratic Party is suppressing the voices of millions and millions of people who support us, support our agenda, support our ideas. So this is not only wrong, it's not only undemocratic, it is extremely unwise in terms of going forward into 2024.
Look, I've never seen candidates cooperate this much. I think it's wonderful the way that Marianne and I are working together on this, and Dean has been helpful in some issues in some states that we're working on together. And this is how it's supposed to be. And we're all supposed to give you options, the voters options, and then you pick the one you like the best. I mean, this is not complicated. This is exactly how democracy's supposed to work. And it's kind of obvious the Democratic Party leadership is nervous that their chosen candidate can't withstand anyone voting. Because he's at 37% approval, 59% disapproval. He's 22 points underwater. He's 15 points lower than when he barely beat Trump last time. Look, they're worried that he's going to lose. We're worried that he's going to lose. That's why we're in the race. So let's have a race. Let's have an election. It's not that complicated. And let's figure out who the Democratic voters want, who they think is the strongest candidate, and the candidate they agree with the most.
This country was not founded to have a political class entitled in its infinite paternalism, decides for the rest of us how things are supposed to be. The whole point of this country is that we would not have that kind of aristocratic mentality. It's not an accident what's happening here in terms of the warnings of George Washington in his farewell address, who said that he feared that political parties would form factions of men who were more loyal to their party than to their country. And John Adams said that he saw political parties as the biggest threat to democracy. Now, I'm a Democrat, a lifelong Democrat, as is Cenk and as is Dean. But when I was growing up, you know, when Eugene McCarthy challenged Lyndon Johnson, when Bobby Kennedy Sr. challenged Lyndon Johnson, nobody thought it was weird. Everybody just thought it was democracy. That's just a created narrative, a concocted narrative that you don't do this. The Constitution confers no special assignation to incumbency. This is just a narrative that was created by them, this idea that you don't challenge an incumbent. And that includes, by the way, Teddy Kennedy challenging Jimmy Carter. It's really important for us to remember, Ronald Reagan defeated Jimmy Carter, not Teddy Kennedy. So we have all of these memes that are out there that are being used to create the impression that Dean and Cenk and I are doing something wrong. We are not doing something wrong. We are running for office. That's not wrong in the United States of America.
Yeah, I'll add one quick thing to that. Guys, there's this mythology that primaries hurt the party. That is totally wrong on several grounds. Whenever anybody goes to talk about that, they go back to the 1970s and 1960s. Well, how about the last two elections? The Republicans had the craziest, wildest, toughest primary
in 2016 on the
in
Republican
2016. Right, and they won. And then in 22, I mean, they were talking about genitals in that primary. It was nuts. And they won. And in 2020, there was 27 candidates. And it was a highly contested Democratic primary, and the Democrats won. So, and by the way, there's a reason for that, because these days, a lot of times, the primaries and the general elections decided by who does a better job in media. And if you run a strong primary, you get hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe even billions of dollars in free media for your party. Not for the individuals, but for the party and for the positions that we all agree with, like paid family leave, higher wages, lower drug prices, etc. But if you don't have a primary, then you're hurting your own party because you're not getting the message out. And all this is in service of what? Obviously not democracy. All this is in service of protecting an incredibly weak incumbent. And now you're going to have no press in the primaries in a situation like that. And you've protected a guy that you think is going to lose in the general election. It's a lose-lose. It's the most counterproductive thing the Democratic Party could possibly do. Me, Marianne, and Dean are here to help the Democratic Party. And any suggestion that an election and a democracy hurts the Democratic Party is absurd on its face.
It's worth noting as well, there's one person who could put an end to all this craziness, and that's President Biden. President Biden should simply make a phone call, say this isn't right, make sure it's changed, and it would be.
Such a great point. If I was the president, I'd be like, oh, Marianne and Dean are running against me. Great, no problem. Let's hear it out. And you know what? Marianne's got good points. So does Dean about money, getting money out of politics, etc. So I'd be happy to debate in that situation, let alone having an election overall. So these are all exceedingly rational and obvious points. Yeah, go ahead, Marianne.
Well, I just agree with Cenk, and I think we can't emphasize it too much. It is hurting the Democratic Party and its chances for 2024 that they are acting this way. Cenk, Dean, and I are not hurting the Democratic chances in 2024. They are.
All right, I think we have time for one last question.
Philippe here with The Hill. Since obviously there's going to be a need for additional funds to fight off these decisions by state parties, have you, Marianne, Cenk, and maybe Dean, have you talked about creating maybe a defense fund to raise enough money for that type of litigation?
Cenk and I have not gone further into that. I was having a conversation with my own team today about a legal defense fund, and Cenk and I have not had a chance to talk about what we might be doing together, what we might be doing separately, but I'm sure whatever those decisions are, you'll know.
Yeah. And from my point of view, and I'll speak just for myself here, for the moment being, the legal defense fund is cenkforamerica.com.
Well, that's already done. That's
okay. And I do want to let you guys know one thing that is not related to this, but Marianne and I are going to be analyzing the Republican debate on December 6th. And the reason I bring that up here is because there's another case of cooperation. Two people running and not afraid of each other, not afraid to work together, not afraid to debate, not afraid to appear on the same stage, etc. We'll be doing that at TYT. So there's no reason why this can't be a perfectly cordial, good primary where the voters, let's not lose our eyes on the prize here. Eyes on the prize are the Democratic voters, where they make the decision and we go forward. That's how it should be. And it's obviously ridiculous for any state party to be considering taking the voice of the voters away when their job is to represent those voters.
They should be facilitating democracy, not thwarting it on any level.
And I just want to add one more point. We have received communication from people that actually belong to the state committee in Florida that are, one, were not aware of this and have become aware and are outraged. So this is not all of Florida state Democrats. This is clearly a move by the executive committee of the Florida State Democratic Party without the knowledge or the consent of delegates or any other members of the Florida State Democratic Party. So the outrage is out there from Florida Democrats that stand for choice, whether they like Marianne or Cenk or Dean Phillips, or they just simply want a fair process for their candidate, whether it's Joe Biden or whoever it is. So there is a lot of good Democrats in Florida that are outraged by this move. This is clearly a move by the executive committee on the Florida State Democratic Party.
That's great to know. And also, I've certainly been hearing from a lot of individuals. I assume that you have as well, Cenk. So they thought that they could just do this, under the cloak of night, and it's out there, and we're not going to stop talking about it. We're not going to bend to this. It's an injustice, and I don't know how anyone could think. I know for myself, and I assume that Cenk feels this way too. This is an opportunity for the American people to see who I am. If I'm willing to bend to this injustice, why would people think that I would be willing to bend to any other injustice, whether it's insurance companies or big oil companies or anything else? It's all a matter of these huge, what are basically corporate forces. And basically that's what these political parties represent, that are seeking to put their power moves before democracy itself. And I'm proud to be among those who simply will not have it.
Yeah. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised that I'm not going to shy away from a fight. All right. Thank you, everybody, for participating.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you for hearing us out. And I look forward to claiming all the Florida delegates since there's no election.
Now. Not so easy. All my best, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.